Welcome to our exploration of the Brahma Sutra Chapter 3, Sadhana Adhyaya. The Brahma Sutra, also known as the Vedanta Sutra, is a foundational text of Hindu philosophy that systematically explores the nature of Brahman, the ultimate reality. It consolidates the teachings of the Upanishads into a structured philosophy and serves as a guide for spiritual seekers. The Brahma Sutra, authored by Badarayana, Vyasa, is part of Uttaramamamsa, Vedanta, and presents a logical framework for understanding Brahman. It is written in aphoristic style, requiring extensive commentary. Great scholars like Shankara, Ramanuj, Madhva, and others have interpreted it through different philosophical perspectives. 4 chapters of the Brahma Sutra are 1. Samanvaya Adhyaya, Understanding Para-Brahman, the Supreme Reality. 2. Aviroda Adhyaya, Refuting Objections from Other Philosophical Schools. 3. Sadhana Adhyaya, Spiritual Practices and Meditations for Realizing Brahman. 4. Phala Adhyaya, Liberation and the State of Liberated Souls. This video is a comprehensive summary of the key teachings found in Chapter 3 of the Brahma Sutras. This chapter deals with the practical means, sadhana, of attaining self-realization, that is, the direct experience of Brahman. It is organized into 4 sections, each with its own set of topics. Chapter 3 explains that liberation, moksha, is not a mere theoretical idea, but is attainable through disciplined practice and inner realization. It teaches that by purifying the mind, controlling the senses, and engaging in the proper method of inquiry, the veil of ignorance, avidya, can be removed. One recognizes one's true nature as identical with Brahman. This practical roadmap includes the study of scriptures, deep reflection, meditation, and the renunciation of selfish attachments. Section 1: Qualifications for the Spiritual Practice. The opening part of Chapter 3 emphasizes that the inquiry into Brahman is not an ordinary intellectual pursuit. It requires a transformation of the inner life. The sutras teach that the seeker must first cultivate a discriminating mind, one that can clearly distinguish the eternal from the transient. This quality, known as viveka, is essential because it allows the aspirant to recognize that the pleasures and pains experienced in everyday life are temporary, while the true self is unchanging. Without such discrimination, any effort at spiritual inquiry will be clouded by attachment to the ephemeral. Equally important is the development of a deep dispassion, or vairogya. This involves a natural indifference toward the outcomes of worldly actions and an absence of craving for material rewards. The sutras insist that only when the seeker is free from selfish desires and remains unaffected by the fluctuations of fortune can he approach the higher truth. The ideal aspirant, therefore, is one who is not swayed by the ups and downs of life, enabling a mind that is calm and receptive. Moreover, the practice requires the cultivation of inner virtues such as sama, mental quietude, and dhamma, self-control. These qualities serve as the foundation upon which a stable inner environment is built, a prerequisite for the deep meditation and contemplation necessary for the realization of Brahman. A disciplined life, marked by regular self-control over one's senses and emotions, gradually purifies the heart and mind, setting the stage for higher knowledge. Practical insight emerges from these teachings. Before delving into the study of scripture or meditation, the seeker must engage in rigorous self-discipline. This inner preparation is not merely academic, but transformative. By steadily purifying the mind and cultivating an unwavering desire for liberation, mumukshutva, the aspirant becomes increasingly capable of experiencing the truth of his own self beyond the temporary body, mind, and senses. Section 2: The Method of Self-Inquiry. Shravan Manana Nididhyasana. The sutras present a systematic approach to self-inquiry that starts with the careful study of the sacred texts. This method, traditionally known as Shravana, requires the aspirant to listen attentively to the Vedic teachings. The scriptures are considered the primary source of knowledge about Brahman. This initial step is vital as it sets the intellectual and spiritual framework for the inquiry. Following the study, the next phase is manana, or deep reflection. In this stage, the seeker uses logical reasoning to analyze and internalize what has been heard. The sutras caution that inference is useful in bridging the gap between scripture and personal understanding. The process of reflection helps clear doubts and reconcile seemingly contradictory ideas. The final stage is nididhyasana, which is the profound meditation on the truths revealed by the scriptures. Through consistent and focused meditation, the mind is gradually purified. This meditative absorption transcends intellectual understanding and brings about a direct realization of Brahman. Nididhyasana is a transformative practice that dissolves ignorance and unveils the true nature of reality. Practically, the threefold approach of listening, reflecting, and meditating serves as a comprehensive roadmap for any seeker. True self-knowledge is not achieved by mere intellectual effort alone. This approach dissolves the barriers of conditioned thought, allowing the aspirant to experience the self-effulgence of Brahman directly. Section 3. Renunciation and Right Action. In this section, the sutras address the common misconception that spiritual progress requires a complete withdrawal from the world. Instead, they explain that the real obstacle is the false identification with the body, mind, and senses. The teachings stress that the source of all suffering is this mistaken self-identification. By understanding that these elements are transient and ultimately non-essential, the seeker is encouraged to renounce the idea, "I am only this body," and instead recognize the true, eternal self. This renunciation is not about physical abandonment of the world, but about shifting one's inner focus from the temporal to the eternal. The sutras also introduce the concept of nishkama karma, or selfless action. They explain that while one must continue to engage in worldly duties, these actions should be performed without any attachment to their outcomes. The purpose of selfless action is to purify the mind, rather than to accumulate material rewards. When actions are performed in this spirit, they help to dissolve the ego and reduce the bondage of desires, thereby preparing the mind for higher spiritual knowledge. Furthermore, the teachings assert that true renunciation integrates both inner and outer actions. The individual is not required to forsake all external responsibilities. Rather, one must act with the understanding that worldly activities are secondary to the pursuit of the self. This balanced approach allows the aspirant to function effectively in daily life while remaining detached from the fruits of action. The sutras emphasize that the real work of the spiritual seeker is internal, transforming one's consciousness to align with the eternal truth. On a practical level, the guidance in this section encourages one to practice detachment in all aspects of life. Whether in success or failure, wealth or poverty, maintaining equanimity helps in breaking the cycle of endless desire and disappointment. By focusing on selfless service and recognizing the impermanent nature of external achievements, the seeker gradually moves closer to the realization that the true self is beyond all worldly limitations. Section 4. The Fruit of Knowledge, Liberation. The final section of Chapter 3 reveals the ultimate outcome of dedicated spiritual practice, liberation, moksha. Here, the sutras teach that when the veil of ignorance is completely lifted, the true self, Atman, is revealed. This realization is not merely an intellectual understanding, but a direct, experiential knowledge that one's own essence is identical with Brahman, the infinite and unchanging reality. A key teaching in this section is the state of Jivan Mukti, or liberation while living. The enlightened individual, having attained knowledge of Brahman, remains unaffected by the fluctuations of pleasure and pain. This inner stability and unshakable peace distinguish a Jivan Mukta from those still entangled in the cycle of birth and death. The text explains that the realization of one's true nature brings an inherent freedom that persists even amid the challenges of worldly existence. Moreover, the sutras describe how the liberation achieved is not a future state to be awaited, but a present reality that transforms every aspect of life. Once the seeker recognizes the self as Brahman, all actions lose their binding power. The cycle of samsara, the endless process of birth, death, and rebirth, is broken because the knowledge of the eternal self eradicates the fundamental ignorance, avidya, that fuels reincarnation. Practical insight from this section is a call to persist in one's spiritual practice without being overly attached to external goals or outcomes. The transformative process of self-realization brings a profound inner joy and freedom that renders all external achievements irrelevant. In the state of liberation, the individual is no longer defined by the transient body or conditioned mind, but lives in a state of constant, unchanging bliss. Ultimately, The teachings of Chapter 3 point out that liberation is the natural fruit of the path laid out by the Vedic wisdom. When the seeker's mind is purified through the disciplines of self-inquiry, renunciation, and right action, the eternal nature of the self shines forth. This realization leads not only to freedom from the cycle of birth and death, but also to an enduring inner peace and clarity, marking the highest human achievement. In summary, Chapter 3 of the Brahma Sutras, known as the Sadhana Adhyaya, provides the blueprint for attaining self-realization and liberation. Its simplified teachings can be summarized as follows. 1. Preparation is essential. A seeker must first cultivate inner purity, discipline, and a sincere desire for liberation. Without these qualifications, the higher knowledge of Brahman cannot be properly received. 2. The method of inquiry. True knowledge is acquired by studying the scriptures, Sravana, reflecting on their meaning, Manana, and meditating deeply, Nididhyasana. This systematic approach helps dissolve ignorance and gradually reveals the eternal self. 3. Right action and renunciation. While engaging in worldly duties, one must practice selfless action and renounce the false identification with transient aspects of life. By understanding that true fulfillment does not lie in material achievements, the seeker can maintain inner detachment. 4. Realization and liberation. The ultimate fruit of disciplined sadhana is the direct realization that the individual self is not separate from Brahman. This realization leads to a state of jivan mukti, where one lives with constant inner peace and is free from the cycle of birth and death. These teachings, presented in a clear, step-by-step manner, offer a practical guide to overcoming the errors of material identification and attaining lasting liberation. By following this path, the aspirant is gradually led to the direct experience of Brahman, where the true nature of the self is revealed in its infinite, blissful, and unchanging reality. Please like this video, subscribe or follow this channel, and share the timeless wisdom with the world. Om Tat Sat.